that as well. So really good to have you all here tonight, together here tonight. Tonight, bear with us. There was a few people who a few of our regulars came to me and said, "Hey man, we can't come tonight, but we'd love to see this. We'd love to have video." And I'm like, okay. So let's try to figure out how to do video on the cheap and on the fly. And I'm using iMovie on my Mac tonight for the first time ever. So we're just going to get it set up and just basically record it so someone can listen to it later.
Does it make you more nervous?
Makes me feel like a guinea pig.
No, so you have experience, right?
I'm the firstborn of 7 kids, so I'm good with guinea pigs.
And you have experience as an online teacher, correct?
I do.
So it's basically very symbiotic thing going on here tonight. So I'll let Stephanie introduce herself. And are you ready then to get started?
I'm ready to go.
Okay, well then we'll just go ahead and
I did just start recording seconds ago, right? So that's what we did.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Okay, well, hey, thank you, all of you, for coming out tonight, because this is something that I really, really love to talk about, something I've taught to high school and middle schoolers for a while, and studied in high school, studied in college, and don't really get into it much now as a mom of 2 very small children. So this is a good break for me. So I just want to dive right in. I have 4 segments, and they could probably go for like 3 hours total if I wanted to get into it, but I'm going to try and pack everything I can into about half that amount of time. If I go too long and you need to duck out, please feel free to do so, because this will probably go long. And take as many notes as you want, because it is going to be a lot of material, and I'll probably go pretty fast. So this is going to be a crash course. But I want to start out by talking about, or raising the question, what do you think of as being poetic? Or what is poetry? What is the essence of poetry? Because we talk about it, it gets thrown around a lot. Kind of tritely, kind of a little bit of disrespect, kind of something sentimental or silly, or sometimes way too seriously. So what do you think of his poetry? I've got a quote up here from Emily Dickinson, and I'd like you to read it. I'll read aloud, and I want to ask you what you think. Emily Dickinson said, "When I feel like the top of my head has come off, I know that is poetry." What do you think she means?
I wonder if that was about her writing it or experiencing someone else's. I don't know.
Could be either. Yeah.
I thought maybe it had something to do with her heart versus her head. Kind of like the analytical mind, when that's off, it's more the heart, stuff coming out of her heart.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think she means by this expression, "when I feel like the top of my head has come off"? What does that even mean? That really stumped me when I first heard it. Has anyone ever experienced
that? A cheap line.
Yeah, slant rhyme. Yeah, that's the term for it.
Yeah.
So, really more assonance than it is straight rhyme, but really good either way. So, awesome. Anyone else?
I like one line, but I couldn't finish the second one because my brain stopped working.
That's okay. That's okay.
Taking a bite sets my taste buds to flight.
Oh, I like that. Good rhyme. Good rhyme. I like sets my taste buds. You got some S and some T's going on there.
That was an accident.
Yeah, see? We tend to have that in our language. Anyone else want to share? I got 2 up here I can pull up too, but I want to hear from you guys.
All right, I have 4 lines here. This came from, it's a funny family story, I guess. We had a watermelon this summer that got carved into a brain. So, we biology people. So, the blade held steady and glinting. He bears down with a firm surgeon's grip. Peeling back layers of green and white, juice squirts pink like his child's eager lips. It's my rhyme. I can't do it.
It's not supposed to rhyme. No, that's
Okay,
free
well,
verse is
I'm
just as
trying.
legitimate as anything else. I really like that. I
Thank
heard
you.
a lot of consonants in that. I heard some like internal rhyme maybe. You can have rhyme that's not at the end of lines, you know. Internal rhyme is a really great technique for subtlety. So, and some good onomatopoeia. I liked it. And really good imagery. Should I skip imagery in my slide? I might have. Like, yeah, I think I did. Oh, maybe I think I cut it out accidentally. Okay, it's on your sheet. It's the 5 senses. The more you can bring the 5 senses into it. So what something looks like. So color, touch, what it feels like, textures, sounds, ring, ding, click. Anything that has to do with 5 senses is very important for imagery. But somehow I did it on my slide. Anyone else want to share? You don't have to. But I've got two here. I got Jen. She said I could share after she left. That was really good. She said, don't eat the seeds. Use caution to keep the cutting board still. So I like that. Eat and seeds are the vowel one, assonance. Okay. Caution to keep the cutting board. So, really good alliteration. Yeah. You notice that keep is a different letter, but it's still part of that alliteration effect because it's the same sound. Okay. And I came up with one. I came up with splurt, splat, splot. I sift seeds between my teeth around mouthfuls of mushy melon. You got alliteration. You got some vowel sounds there. And I love you. So, pretty good. Keep working on this when you go home. It's a fun little exercise. All right. If I got time, I mean, it's getting close to 8:30, so if people need to go, I got 2 parts left. We'll see how much I get through. We're going to talk about easy mistakes to make when it comes to poetry. Well, they're not errors, but places where it could be so much better if we just applied one of the techniques we've learned about more effectively. So there are a few different ways to undermine rhythm. If you have a cheating meter, if you throw a lot of stressed syllables together, then they kind of vie for attention, and you have to really pick and choose which of the ones you want to unstress. If you, like they did over here, you kind of assume an unstressed is in one spot or assume that it's in another spot, it can be hard to scan. Poor grammatical construction can actually really mess with this. If you have a sentence fragment or you have, if it's not clear what the noun is and the verb is and which ones go together, you can end up with some real confusion. That can make scansion hard. It can make your meaning get obscured too. And awkward syllable placement. So if you're writing a song and you put the high note on the, it doesn't work so well. It's a wrenched meter, okay? So now I got to pick on worship music a little bit because I have some pet peeves and I feel so great I can share them with all you. Get it off my chest. So the songs Our God and Cornerstone that we sing a lot in church. I actually really like the melody of Our God. It's the one, our God is greater, awesome in power, our God, the one that goes like that. I like the tune. I think it's catchy. But every time I listen to the words, it's kind of like, wait a second. I don't really know what's going on here. There's no person, there's no noun, there's a lot of sentence fragments, and there's some weird parallel construction. So I'm going to escape actually and pull up and show you what I mean. So you can see it right in front of you. There you go. Okay. Okay, so we have the first line. Water you turned into wine opened the eyes of the blind. Does that sound goofy to anyone else? If I put a the at the front of the phrase, the water you turned into wine opened the eyes of the blind. Anyone else hear this? Who's opening the eyes of the blind? Or what is opening the eyes of the blind in this sentence? Is there a you there?
I don't know. Is there? I don't know.
What's actually opening the eyes
Without a
of the blind?
semicolon in that sentence, it's the water turned into wine.
The water opened the eyes of the blind. Do you see that? Okay, I know this is a grammar.
Yeah, we're all used to hearing it a million times, so we know what it means.
You know what it
We know
means,
what the author
but
intended,
if somebody
but
walks
it's not
in,
actually in the
the
words.
water,
It's
you're
just those
preaching
different
bad theology to the,
associations.
no, sorry. Okay, so we have just a mixed up sentence because we didn't keep track of what our grammar was doing, okay? Open the eyes of the blind, there's no one like you. Does that sound kind of like a jumble there? That's a run-on sentence. Into the darkness you shine, out of the ashes we rise. What part goes with what there? You shine out of the ashes or into the darkness you shine? See what I mean? There is a little bit of, well, wait, okay, let me stop and think about this. And when we sing it, we can kind of hear some of the breaks more naturally, but you see it on the screen, it's like, okay, wait a second, what's going on? Here's another, I have to pick on this song so much, sorry. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. Greater than what? Stronger than what? When you use a comparative in English, you always have to have something you're comparing it to. So if he's greater than, okay, you're left hanging, okay? God, you are higher than any other. Okay, we cleared it there, that's all right. Our God is healer, awesome in power, our God, our God. So is healer the same thing as stronger? when we describe God? Is he either something he is, or does it describe a quality of his? Try to break this down for you. Kind of. Okay. Is healer a person or a thing?
Yeah.
Like it's an occupation, it's an identity of sort. Okay. Is stronger a person or a thing? Like, can I say stronger walked down the street today? Or can I say the healer walked down the street today? I don't say the stronger walked down the street today. I say the healer walked down. So
That's two words, but they're not.
they're two different parts of speech. One is a noun, the other is an adjective. Okay, and this is a parallel construction fail. We talked about parallelism earlier in our structure, having the same kinds of words in the same kind of places. And here we get some neat internal rhymes because they all end in er, but one is a noun and one is an adjective. We're describing what God is like with stronger, greater, but we're saying who he is when we say he's healer. Okay, does that make sense? So, I mean, it just kind of blows past us. It's easy to ignore. It doesn't catch our attention or anything like that. But stuff like this can actually kind of trip us up, maybe subconsciously, or maybe somebody who's not familiar with the song could trip them up too.
I have a quick question about the our God is greater, our God is stronger, and not answering what. Could that be an artistic choice to let that be open to the mind of the listener?
Yes, yes. There
I
are
don't know if
definitely, yeah. So I wanted to pull this up as like an example of how it could be a mistake, but there are definitely occasions where you make mistakes purposefully, knowingly, wittingly, for a specific effect. And that's definitely legitimate. But it needs to be clear that that was intentional on purpose instead of, wait a second, I'm not sure I understand that, you know. And that's, you know, like you need to know the rules in order to break them, that kind of a tension there. That's a good point. Okay. So what was the other one I was going to look at? Oh yeah, this one. Okay, yeah. So Cornerstone, we sing this one a lot, and I really like a lot of the lyrics because they're a hymn that I grew up with, and I enjoy the hymn. Why not? But the chorus they've added to the hymn: Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Don't have any problems with that. But then we get to through the storm. Does anyone hear that? Through the storm. Okay, we're emphasizing the. We're putting the text painting in the wrong spot. We're putting the high note on the. So that's something every time I hear it in church. Wait, okay, it's okay. It's a worship song. It's all right. So, but it's an example. It's a strong example of that. Okay, I'm going to skip the other example I had because it's kind of long and I don't want to waste time. Okay, ways to undermine sounds. We already talked about slant rhyme, right? When it's really close to rhyme, we can kind of fudge it, but it's not quite. Perfectly okay to use that, but be aware you're using it so you know what kind of effect you're achieving. Or no musicality. If you're full of consonants in your words, or you're having a lot of short vowels instead of long, resonant consonances, then it can affect how it sounds when it's read aloud. Ways to undermine figurative language. When you have a lot of cliches, stuff that we say all the time, where you're really conveying a lot of meaning or beauty when you say stuff that's become so ingrained into our awareness that it doesn't really communicate much more than it has for forever. Or generic language. When you say, oh, it's a really bright day outside, but it's supposed to get cloudy later. And rather than saying, you know, the sun felt like porcupine pricklers on the back of my neck today. You know, one thing's kind of generic, one thing's really, oh, that's an image. Okay. And here, okay. This is something that I wrote when I was in college, and it is chock full of not very good writing, as a bit of a joke. Is anyone familiar with Chaucer's Canterbury Tales? Okay. This is something that was written kind of in the Middle Ages, medieval times, and it's a whole bunch of stories. The idea is they're a bunch of travelers on the road together. They're trying to pass the time, so they're telling each other stories in lyric verse. Okay, and for each story, there's an introduction of the character, and then there's the story that the character tells. And so we had a writing assignment for this English class where I was studying Chaucer, and we were supposed to try to come up with our own Canterbury Tale. And, you know, you didn't have to write in verse or anything, but I was up really late one night, and the muse hit, and I couldn't stop it. So I came up with something that was pages long with just a bunch of doggerel. It was really ridiculous. And that actually kind of fit with Chaucer because some of his characters are really good with poetry, and some of them are really just kind of winging stuff and having mixed metaphors and all kinds of things. So I have this poem, and I'm not sure how much of it is going to go over people's heads or not, but I'm going to try to read the first little bit that I wrote. So this is the main character of the troupe, and he's going around asking people to share their stories. And he says, "My eyes alit then on a figure which I hadn't noticed prior, a crouching, slippery, restless thing, slight and short, and bereft of bling, save 1 or 2 or 3 small knives, polished shinily at her side, for it was a her, no doubt, as well-placed endowments found her out. She was an agent, as I surmised, claiming to work for a funding redistribution enterprise. She's a thief. Her verbiage matched her getup. There wasn't a clean stitch in the whole setup. Her nose upturned, a freckled pearl, her hair attractive as a squirrel. She glanced about with beady eyes, because there is no other word for eyes that bead. I tried. And kept the knives unsheathed and ready, should, she said, some lad too heady for his helmet come too close." And it goes on and on. So there's some obvious errors in meter in there. Claiming to work for a funding redistribution enterprise. Does that fit with any? No. Doesn't fit with anything. Okay. Her hair attractive as a squirrel. Okay, that's kind of trying to be a simile, but it's ironic. It's not an actual simile. You're comparing one thing to another thing, and you're supposed to be similar in this respect, and it's not. A lot of slant rhyme, surmised, enterprised, knives and side, not really a rhyme. Bling, it's a cliche. It's slang. It doesn't really belong in a structured poem.
Also doesn't fit with.
It doesn't fit with the style,
Yeah.
right? Okay, it's intentionally anachronistic. So there's a lot of things in here that don't really fit with what it's supposed to be. But it's used for a particular fact. It was supposed to be humorous, and I was just having fun with it. But it would not pass as an actual Canterbury tale. Okay. Ways to undermine imagery. If we have abstract words, it's really easy to have weak or vague words that describe ideas rather than concrete senses. So if we talk about the 5 senses, we want to describe how something looks. We could say it's pretty, beautiful, attractive, or interesting. Does that tell me anything about what the thing actually looks like? Is it a rock? Is it a person? Is it an animal? None of those words tell me that it's furry or shiny or blue, or you get what I'm saying here? Okay, it's really easy to have abstract language or vagueness. And participles. What's the other one? Oh yeah, there's another. I'll show you in a second. Or trite expressions, where you're not really being emotionally genuine or open or sharing. You're just kind of glossing over the emotions you actually feel. Okay, so this is an example of participles undermining the power of I. This is another worship song I'm sing. Standing on this mountaintop, looking just how far we've come, knowing that for every step you were with us. Who's doing the standing, looking, and knowing? We are, and we shows up elsewhere in the sentence. But is it a strong presence? Does it start the idea?
It could be anyone, anything on the mountaintop.
It could be anyone or anything on the mountaintop. It could be anyone. Like, it's not specific about who the person is or what that person is like or their personal experience of God. It's very generic. And on some level, this kind of makes sense for a worship song, right? Because we want it to be accessible and wide open. But it also introduces a certain amount of vagueness. So there's a lot of that in that. Seeing just how much you've done. Is that specific about what God has actually done for us? I mean, some worship songs get into, like, the imagery of Christ on the cross, or maybe what it felt like when you discovered the empty tomb, or, you know, a lot of concrete details about holding those burial clothes and they're empty, but they've still got the oils on them, you know, from the burial. You could get into that, but saying just how much you've done doesn't really communicate that in a crystallized, powerful form. And again, worship songs have different purposes in different places, but this one doesn't have a lot of specificity to it. Ways to undermine refrains is when we have useless repetition. We repeat the same thing over and over again, which again, for like worship, if you just kind of want to resound a certain phrase in your mind and memorize it and meditate on it, that has a purpose. One of my college friends, I used to hate repetition in college. I felt like a lot of worship songs don't know anything but repeat. She said, but you know, if you just want to stand there and meditate on that line, that's worth something. That's a good thing. So she pointed that out to me, and I think she's right. But if you're reading a poem, which is not a song you're just singing to yourself over and over. If you're reading a poem, if you have like every other line is kind of the same word or phrase, it doesn't convey as much as it could. Also, if you steal from the greats or you steal from your own stuff and you kind of just talk about the same stuff all the time with the same words in your poems, compress those into one poem. Make it really crystallized. Pull it all together in one spot and make it really pop, rather than just spreading it out so much. Okay, so we could revise. We could practice revising. If you want to do another exercise, we could practice trying to introduce more vagueness to the song, or we could do something else. Yep.
Back to the lyrics, right, of this song. Like very often, if I try to write a worship song, I struggle to put the right words to rhyme at the end of a line and trying to fit the melody.
Mm-hmm.
And then does it ends up with vagueness, like you said, you know, because I'm trying to play with words. So it's either I get stuck, what words should I use, you know, how to rhyme the next line or the last word of that line. So that's my problem.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's really hard to write poetry if you're trying to do more than one technique perfectly at a time. I think that's why revising and having multiple drafts is really useful. So and the first thing I would throw out when I'm trying to write a poem is end rhyme. Go back to the end rhyme later. But I would say get the imagery and get the substance there first, get the genuine emotion there first. You can always go back and change word choices with a dictionary, a thesaurus, or something like that, and change phrases. But you want to make sure the substance is there first, because you can have beautiful poems without end rhymes, right? You don't have to have the end rhyme. In fact, some poems really stand out more if they don't have rhymes. They feel more natural, more real to us now, because that's not a common expression. So I would try to just get the imagery in there first and worry about the exact phrasing later on the second run through. And maybe it's just a poem that doesn't want to be a fixed form. Use internal rhymes or something else. That would be my advice. So we can apply some techniques, or we can look at some really cool poetry and songs. Which do you want to do? Do you want to workshop it out, or do you want to look at some cool stuff? Or you can just leave because it's after 8:30. You want to look at some poetry? Okay, all right, that's what I want to do too. Okay, this is a song by a guy named Andrew Peterson. He's a Christian songwriter. And I could play the song for you, or I could just read this chunk of it that I really wanted to pull out. But do I hear it?
Sure.
Do I hear it?
You guys see it?
No, I'm not going to sing it. No, that is much better. I think this is a beautiful song. I'm just going to play part of it, though.
I grew up in a little town, a southern mix of lost and found. Most folks seem to stick around. Oh, but I could hear the highway song. I'd sit out on the dock till dawn and dream about the great beyond. A dream that I was a world traveler, set me loose to find my way. Just get me out on the road someday with my sails unfurled. So many mysteries I wanted to unravel. If I could travel the world. Soon enough I had my way. I saw the world the Lord has made, mostly from the interstate. Oh, but I had hardly seen a thing until I gave that golden ring to the one who gave her heart to me. And I became a world traveler. Just the day I hit the road, I walked the hills of the human soul of a tender girl. I'm a world traveler. She opened the gate and took my hand, led me into the mystic land where galaxies swirl. So many mysteries I never will unravel. I want to travel the world.
Okay, I'm going to cut it off there because it's a little bit longer. I know, it's so pretty. I love it. I love that one. And it goes on, and there's a lot of beautiful, beautiful poetry in this. And I've highlighted some of the techniques that I really love in the song And he goes on. He describes his relationship with his wife. He describes his relationship with his children and how he finds fulfillment in knowing the vastness of another human being's mind and heart compared to just having adventures on the road. It's really pretty. So he has this phrase, I walk the hills of the human soul of a tender girl. What technique is that? Got it highlighted on the screen. Can somebody identify that technique? The hills of the human soul. Do human souls have hills? Metaphor. It's a metaphor, right? It's a beautiful metaphorical image. She doesn't have hills, and her soul doesn't have hills, but that's a metaphor. Another verse says, well, tonight I saw the children in their rooms, little flowers all in bloom, burning suns and silver moon. And somehow in those starry skies, the image of the Maker lies right here beneath my roof tonight. So hold on tight. And he goes on. So I love the poetic technique here. Bloom, moon, rooms. End rhyme kind of, but what's the stronger technique here? Because you got rooms, you got the other two. Assonance is my favorite. That's why I love it. Okay. You also got a lot of alliteration. Sun, somehow, silver, starry, sky, saw. A lot of alliteration there. And some consonants, because you got lies and skies. The S is on the ends of those words, as well as flowers and suns. S is on the ends, too. The image of the Maker lies right here beneath my roof tonight. What's that?
An illusion?
It is an illusion. Who said that? Yeah, because the image of God, right? That's a common idea in a lot of Christian literature and theological teaching, right? So it's an allusion to that idea, but it's also like, is that idea literally lying beneath his roof tonight? That concept? Right. Who's he talking about? His children, right. It's the image of God, but he's really talking about his children, right? Okay. And then we have Powerify. That's why I have I marked up in red. I'm a world traveler. So there's a lot of personal experience to hear. Here's another beautiful song that I heard on Prairie Home Companion. Anyone listen to that on NPR? I love Prairie Home Companion. Come on, reload. Does anyone know Chris Thiele from Nickel Creek? I grew up listening to a lot of bluegrass, and Chris Thiele was the cool young bluegrass guy.
Is he the mandolin?
The mandolin
Yes, the
player,
mandolin.
right, yeah.
I don't know how to say it last.
Yeah, so I was in Christian homeschooling circles, and everybody was listening to Chris Thiele at Nickel Creek. And then he grew up, he's about my age, and now he's doing Prairie Home Companion, and I'm here with my kids, but, you know, whatever. And Prairie Home Companion is this radio show that plays on the weekends on NPR, and he hosts it, and he was in the city of Philadelphia right after the election, the presidential election. And he had some just really profound, wise, kind words to kind of say about the whole situation. He channeled the sentiment of the nation, I think, really well at that time. And was very gentle about it, but he was also really insightful about the deepness of the feeling that a lot of us were feeling at the time, regardless of which side you're on or who you voted for. It was really, really good thought. So I wanted to share this too. I'm going to pull it out.
Sorry. Puns, dumb new lyrics for existing songs. All byproducts of fatherhood, I'm told. I showed up a year and a half ago when my son was born, along with 2 wildlife-themed sweaters just appearing in the closet, which for a while I told myself I was wearing ironically, but alas, it turns out I actually just think they're cool, because I'm a dad. It's also the very soul of dadhood to avoid a difficult topic by calling for a group hug in the room. And I'll be smarter, better spoken people than myself to say more than that. But I did make a little something for you. Just wait here. To my sweet little boy and dear wife, for the dream that I've called my life. To my mother and dad, and my brothers and trying to hear through the din of this boorish year. To those of us singing la la la, fingers stuck in what's left of our years. And whether you laugh and cry, if you're doing your best to be kind, this land is as much yours as mine, as God is my witness. I'll make this for you. I'll make this for this land is as much yours as mine, as God is my witness. Light shining on a dark night isn't. Bright wash from the storm isn't. More like a piece of paper covered in things and glitter stuck to a tune you can hum as you wait for the pundits to finish dissecting our fate. Here's hoping our next 4 years don't feel as long as Chicago's last 108. God bless us. God bless us. As we put the front pages to bed, with the war raging on in our heads, I could write a swath of humanity all because of something that I just read. But I don't want to fight fire with fire, and I don't want to preach to the choir. So whether you're laughing or crying, if you're doing your best to be kind, this land is as much yours as mine, as God is there with me. Happy Saturday.
I love that. I just love that so much. Let's see. Okay, there is so much good poetic techniques that he's using this. It's kind of unreal. Oh gosh, I don't know where to start. How many allusions did you notice? There's a lot of allusions in this. Or which allusions did stand out to you? Not how many. Here's some of the lyrics on the screen here.
Chicago's last 100 years.
Okay, does anyone remember that right before the election, if you're a baseball fan, I'm a baseball fan, maybe nobody else here is, but Chicago, the Chicago Cubs, had never won a World Series in 108 years. And they did right before the election. It was kind of this big mind-blowing thing in sports. It was like, whoa, that could actually happen. They had this great big curse that they finally broke. So that was a contemporaneous news event that had kind of really surprised a lot of people in the nation. And so he makes this allusion, okay, we're waiting so long. So this is part of his political slant coming through. Like, here's hoping the next 4 years don't feel as long as the last 108 for Chicago. That is as direct as I think he gets in this. But putting politics aside, what's the refrain that he keeps coming back to? There are two refrains that he comes back to in the song. Remember what they are?
This land is as much yours as mine.
This land is as much yours as mine, and doing your best to be kind, and
I made this for you, right?
I made this for you, and I mean, we're reciting basically the chorus here, but some of these lines he just repeats in and of themselves, by themselves a lot. He repeats, if you're doing your best to be kind, this land is as much yours as mine. Together, he repeats those a lot. And he also says, as God is my witness, just kind of sprinkled throughout the whole thing. And I made this for you. Since the end of the song is kind of still fresh in our minds, he ends with, I made this for you over and over again. It's very quiet. It's very soft. It's very humble. What does it remind you of? This might not work unless you're a parent, but he has this metaphor earlier in the poem where he says, okay, this song that I made for you, a light shining on a dark night, it isn't. A bright warm shelter from the storm, it isn't. More like a piece of paper covered in paste and glitter, stuck to a tune you can hum. So he's saying, my song isn't it's not great. It's not particularly impressive. It's not something that's going to fix all your problems. But it's more like a piece of paper covered in paste and glitter. Who makes paper like that? Kids. You know, you go to Sunday school or you go to day school or whatever, and you bring home for your... I made this for you. Right? That's the sentiment he's expressing. I made this for you. Just the quiet, gentle, this is all I got. It's not much. But I love you and I want you to have it. And I think that's gorgeous. I think that's gorgeous. How he uses that. He has that really distinct image in the middle of the song, and then he just repeats it like, I made this for you through the whole thing. There's a lot of other stuff here. There's a lot of Power Vine stuff, but those are some of my favorite parts of it. I'm going to skip this one because there's some others that can get better. Maybe I should have finished with the Christie one. This is one that's, Nate and I heard this musician, when we went on our honeymoon in Ireland. It's a lady by the name of Cara Dillon, not a Christian composer. Christie is kind of in the middle. I think he was a Christian when he was growing up, and he's done a lot in the secular music business since then, so I think he kind of writes line. I'm not sure what he believes now, to be totally honest, but so kind of writes line there. And then Cara Dillon is just a folk singer who writes a lot of her own music, and she wrote this song after touring a lot and realizing she hadn't been home in a long time, and she wrote this song describing her hometown and how much she loves about it. So we'll listen to that a little quick here too.
For too I've been a stranger to the hands of broken shame, and your arms and your rain with sand and souls of the prairie walls in the wind they say, come away, to the muddy street. With the time being low and the balance swell of the wide and low, and still my tear, the bridge will come away, they say, to the bad has one this life, and the lonely smile with a sword in his hand, and his daughter on the stiller, in every stream and glare, and his home can be seen from the head of the sea. long night. I've been a stranger here to the hands of falling shame, and your rocks and your rain and the silent soul walks the prairie walls and the wind they say, come away, come away.
That's basically. Okay. She doesn't sing anymore, so I'm going to stop it there. There's a lot of beautiful letter techniques in this poem. And they're subtle because she doesn't have a lot of them in one place, but she kind of scatters them lightly throughout each stanza. First of all, I want to point out she doesn't have consistent end rhyme. Notice that? Look at the end words in each of her stanzas. Here and rain don't rhyme. Walls and away don't rhyme. But then below row rhyme. And clan and glen are pretty close slant rhyme. Okay?
Can you make it bigger again?
Yeah, I'll do that. So she uses end rhyme, but she's not tied to it, okay? She uses a lot of consonants and alliteration, but she uses it subtly. She uses alliteration in rocks and rain, 2 words. Silent souls, 2 words. Walls and wind, 2 words in 2 separate lines. And then walls and wind and away, that W sound is consonants there because it's the beginning of the words and it's also in the middle. But she's not peppered the whole stanza with W's or S's or R's, okay? The murmuring stream, that's personification. It's on your sheet as well. I didn't get into it. She's turning the stream into having human attributes. Streams don't actually murmur. That's something that people do. But she's personifying the stream. She's making it more human, and that's a metaphor. Same for a babbling swell. You still might hear. That's the power of I. She's giving you a person to say, okay, you're hearing this, and I'm not hearing the great O'Canahan Clan. It's like, you may still hear this. You're an agent. You're a person in this narrative. And then she uses repetition a lot. And starts 5 lines of the poem. It's a weak word. Why would she do that? Any guesses?
Is that to stick with the meter?
It helps with the meter, yeah.
I think it's also because of, this might just be the musician in me talking, but I think a lot of it's trying to grab that little melodic hook she does up into most lines.
Yeah. She does
The opening of that melody is not emphasized, it's a pickup, and so you
pickup.
need a weak word to begin a line that's going to follow that hook.
Yeah. Yep.
I think.
Yeah, and the first line of each stanza, for too long time, she emphasizes the first words in that first stanza. But that's the only time she really emphasizes those first few words. Every other time, she's pretty much got a pickup, like you said, and just keeps it rolling, kind of keeps rebounding in on itself. And that repeated word, every time using that weak word, but the same word every time. And this, and this, and this, and this. What's the effect? Remember, she's reminiscing about her hometown she's not seen for a while. What's the effect that she wants to achieve, perhaps, with that? It's subtle. What do you think she's doing?
I mean, again, to me it reminds me of what happens when I'm kind of just lost in my head. A lot of unrelated little images, little snippets of whatever I'm thinking about, just kind of colliding into each other, bouncing together, and collectively have a picture of what's my headspace. Precisely because it's kind of disjointed. There's just all these different little aspects of.
Yeah, the memories
What
are
I'm
flooding in.
thinking.
All these memories. She can't control the flood of thought and the memories, the experience of having all these images kind of, oh, I remember this place, and I remember this, and I remember the history over here, and I remember these people. And she's using the refrain effect, the repetition effect, to give it that sense of kind of bombardment. And, oh, I can't keep up with all these thoughts together. It's really subtle, but I think that's why she's using it. So, some of the stuff in this poem. And the last poem I have is one of my favorites, and I'll let y'all go because I know it's way late. But this is Gerard Manley Hopkins. I love Gerard Manley Hopkins. He writes or wrote tons and tons of sonnets. He's a Christian believer, uses such really good, piercing, descriptive language, lots of beautiful imagery, lots of great poetic techniques. Lots of action in his poetry, a lot of doing stuff. So I'm just going to read this aloud. This is called God's Grandeur, if you want to look it up, by Gerard Manley Hopkins. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out